what reasons she thought was in this, but it was.
Because she loved you?
No, she was attracted to me. I know she wasn't in love with me.
Most people fall in love first, right? Physically,
Yeah.
They look at each other compatibly. You guys had the spiritual.
It began with a voice that had been silent for years, but never again. Inside the courtroom, tension pressed against the walls like a living thing. Every shuffle of paper, every hushed whisper died the instant the sound of heels began to echo across the marble floor. Meri Brown, the woman once painted as silent, submissive, and endlessly patient, rose from her seat. No cameras were allowed, but if they had been, every lens would have turned to her. The woman who had spent decades sitting quietly in the shadow of polygamy now stepped into the blinding light of justice. She wore a dark navy blazer, crisp and severe, her blonde hair pulled back in a no-nonsense knot. Clutched tightly in her hand was a thick folder, not just paper but years of pain, of promises broken, of evidence collected in silence while the world thought she had simply faded away. Her eyes did not blink. Not when she passed Robyn, who sat rigid and pale beside Kody. Not when she locked eyes with the man who had once sworn to love her equally, who had paraded their spiritual bond, while slowly erasing her from his life. Meri stopped at the stand. She lowered the microphone just slightly as if preparing to speak to the world itself. The courtroom held its breath. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady but trembling at its edges, carrying the weight of long-buried fury and sorrow. "I stand here today to reclaim what was owed to me. Not just as a wife, but as a woman, as a mother, as a human being." She paused, her gaze slicing toward Kody, who sat stiff, jaw locked, arms folded as if bracing for an attack. "I want what's mine," Meri said again, slower this time, each word like steel striking stone. "And I am not backing down." A ripple of gasps swept across the gallery. For years, the world had known Meri Brown as the dutiful first wife, the one who smiled while crumbling, who remained loyal even as her marriage disintegrated on national television. Fans had watched her heartbreak, her isolation, the humiliating catfish scandal, her desperate attempts to cling to a family already slipping away. But this was not that woman. This was the reckoning. Today was about Coyote Pass, 12 desolate acres of Arizona dust and trees, once sold as a dream of unity, of future homes built side by side. A legacy. An inheritance. Kody's grand fantasy. But that dream had been stolen. Behind Meri sat Janelle, arms crossed tight, lips pressed into a razor-thin line. The years had weathered them both, carved valleys of pain and resilience into their faces. Yet in Janelle's eyes flickered the same fire that burned in Meri's, a shared betrayal. They had entered this courtroom not as sister wives, but as survivors, women pushed to the margins of their own lives who had finally decided to redraw the boundary lines in their own blood if they had to. The judge, a calm silver-haired woman in her 60s, gave a small nod. "Mrs. Brown, you may proceed." Meri unfolded her first sheet of paper with shaking hands. "This," she began, holding it up, "is an August 14, 2018 payment statement. It shows a deposit from my business account into the family trust, the very trust meant to fund the purchase of Coyote Pass." She raised a second document. "This is an email from our real estate broker confirming my investment interest in that property." She swallowed hard, her voice tightening. "And this is a signed duplicate of our show contract, the agreement where all the wives agreed that income from filming would support our shared family dream. The homes, the future, this land." Her lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in a tan suit, nodded subtly from the corner. Meri's voice grew darker. "When Kody and I legally divorced in 2014 so he could adopt Robyn's children, I did so believing his promise. That spiritual equality would still stand. That our covenants would still mean something." Her eyes drilled into Kody like arrows. That was a lie. Kody's jaw clenched harder, his knuckles white against the table. Robyn fidgeted, her gaze darting down, lips trembling as if she might cry. "I spent 30 years in this family," Meri continued, her voice rising. "I raised a child. I built a brand. I helped create a show that gave Kody the very fame and fortune he used to build this place. And now I've been quietly, indirectly, but deliberately told I am not worthy of a single acre." Her hands gripped the wooden rim of the stand. "I surrendered my legal marriage. I surrendered my voice. But I am done giving. Behind her, Janelle gave the smallest nod. Silent. Fierce. Like a soldier. Meri inhaled slowly, turning back to the judge. This isn't about real estate, she said, each syllable cutting through the silence. It's about dignity. It's about keeping your word. About not letting one man rewrite history to crown himself the victor while the women who built his empire are erased. The courtroom seemed to freeze. Not even the air dared move. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Brown, are you claiming that the Coyote Pass property was always intended to be split evenly among all 4 wives? Yes, Your Honor. That was the deal. Verbal, emotional, financial, and on paper. Did you know your name was missing from the deed? Not until late 2023, when Janelle and I finally compared our documents. And what did you do? I confronted Kody. He said he worked harder so he should get more. But that was never the agreement. We never measured each other's worth by income. We built this as a family. It was supposed to be equal. The judge's pen scratched quietly across her notes. The bailiff approached the clerk's desk with an evidence folder. Kody's lawyer shot to his feet, voice cold and sharp. Objection, Your Honor. This testimony is purely emotional. Mrs. Brown's contributions were spiritual, not financial. She has no claim. A murmur rippled through the gallery, part disbelief, part outrage. Meri stepped down from the stand, her composure like tempered steel. A faint, disbelieving scoff escaped her lips. Her attorney rose in her place, eyes blazing. It was clear. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And for the first time, Kody Brown looked like a man who knew he might lose everything. The courtroom had gone still after Meri stepped down. But something had changed in the air, like the sharp crackle before a thunderstorm. Kody stared straight ahead, his face stone, but his fingers drummed the table in a frantic rhythm he didn't seem aware of. Robyn's mascara had smudged into gray shadows beneath her eyes. And then, the scrape of a chair. Janelle Brown rose. The room shifted, heads turning. For years, Janelle had been known as the calm one, the measured, rational backbone of the family who never sought attention, who worked quietly in the background to hold the chaos together. But the woman who stepped toward the witness stand now was not quiet. She was fire held in human form. Her green eyes burned. And she carried a single worn ledger clutched to her chest. She took her place, lowering herself into the chair as if anchoring into the ground. The judge nodded. Mrs. Brown, proceed. Janelle opened the ledger, pages rustling like the turning of years. Her voice was low, calm, but each word landed like a hammer. For over a decade, she began, I managed the family finances. I budgeted our earnings from sister wives. I balanced the bills, the mortgages, the business accounts. I kept records because someone had to. She glanced at Kody. He didn't blink. This ledger, she lifted it slightly, contains every payment I made into the Coyote Pass fund. And payments from Meri. And Christine. Even small contributions from the older kids who believed they were investing in their legacy. A murmur swept through the spectators. Janelle's tone hardened. But here is what you won't find. A single acknowledgement of those payments in the official deed. Because Kody removed our names. All of ours. Kody flinched just barely. His lawyer whispered something but he ignored it. Janelle's breath caught. Her calm cracked. For years he told me, be patient. The land is ours. We'll build homes side by side. I believed him. I defended him. Even when he forgot birthdays, when he stopped visiting the kids, when he said he was too busy building for the family, while only building for Robyn. Her voice rose, trembling. Last year I found the deed. Only Kody's name. Only Robyn's name. Robyn gasped, shaking her head slightly, tears slipping down her cheeks. I confronted him, Janelle said, staring at Kody now, voice breaking like glass. And he said, I earned it. You didn't. The words seemed to slice through the room like cold steel. Janelle's shoulders squared. That was the moment I realized. This was never about family. This was about ownership. About control. About erasing us. The judge's brow furrowed. Mrs. Brown, to be clear, you are asserting that funds from all 4 wives went into the purchase of Coyote Pass, but only Mr. Brown and Mrs. Brown Robyn are on the deed? Yes, Your Honor, Janelle said firmly. And I have the bank statements, contracts, and signed receipts to prove it. She set the ledger down with a final, echoing thud. Kody's jaw twitched. He stood abruptly. "This is slander," he barked. "They're bitter. They didn't work as hard. They want to tear me down because Mr. Brown, down," the judge snapped, voice slicing like a whip. The bailiff stepped forward. Kody froze, rage trembling through him like an earthquake barely contained. Robyn reached for his arm. He jerked away. The gallery buzzed with whispers. Then Robyn rose, her face wet and pale. Her voice trembled like shattered glass. "Your Honor, this is being twisted. Kody worked for this land. He carried the burden alone. The other wives, they gave up. They walked away." Her words broke into sobs. They walked away and left him with nothing but pieces. Meri's head turned slowly, eyes sharp. Janelle didn't move. The judge simply stared. "Mrs. Brown, Robyn," the judge said quietly, "are you stating that the other wives did not contribute financially?" I don't know," Robyn stammered. Kody said, "Enough," the judge said sharply. Silence dropped like a curtain. The judge shuffled the evidence folders slowly, carefully. The room seemed to shrink around her as she read each sheet. Pages turned. Pens scratched. Seconds stretched into hours. Finally, she set her glasses down. Her voice was steady but final, the sound of a door locking. "This court finds sufficient preliminary evidence that Mrs. Meri Brown and Mrs. Janelle Brown made documented financial contributions toward the Coyote Pass property, and that their exclusion from the deed constitutes potential fraud and breach of fiduciary duty." Kody's face went dead white. "Effective immediately," the judge continued, "this court places a temporary injunction on the sale, transfer, or modification of the Coyote Pass property until a full ownership hearing is conducted. Furthermore, the court orders that all financial records from the family trust, production income, and property deeds be turned over within 10 business days." Gasps exploded through the gallery. Meri's hand flew to her mouth. Janelle closed her eyes just for a second, as if allowing herself the smallest breath of victory. Kody just sat motionless, as if the weight of years had suddenly crushed him all at once. Robyn folded into herself, sobbing into her hands. And just like that, the empire Kody built on their silence had begun to fall apart, inside the very walls he thought would protect him. The silent storm breaks the air in the courtroom was thick with anticipation, almost oppressive. It pressed against the walls, the ceiling, the polished wood of the benches. Every whispered murmur, every shuffle of feet, every cough seemed magnified, swallowed, and reborn as tension. For years, Meri Brown had sat quietly at the edge of this storm, her voice restrained by polygamous tradition, loyalty, and a belief in the fairness that never came. But today that silence ended. A set of heels clicked sharply against the marble. Heads turned instinctively. Cameras were barred, but had they been allowed, every lens would have been fixed on her. Every light would have burned on the woman who had once receded into shadows, who had smiled politely while enduring betrayals behind the cameras, behind the smiles, behind the show. Meri walked with a purpose that made every step deliberate, heavy with decades of patience and pain. She wore a navy blazer, crisp and authoritative, her blonde hair tightly bound in a knot at the back of her head. In her hand she clutched a folder fat with documents, papers that carried the weight of years of silent contributions, overlooked efforts, and stolen promises. This folder was more than evidence. It was her legacy, her testimony, her weapon. Her gaze was steady. Not a flicker, not a hesitation. She passed Robyn, whose eyes were wide, her jaw tight. She passed Kody, who sat stiff, his arms crossed, fingers tapping an impatient rhythm on the table. He had once promised equality, respect, and partnership, but now his impassive stare seemed brittle, fragile, as if the weight of decades of deceit might finally crack him. Meri approached the microphone. She adjusted it slightly, her movements calm, practiced, betraying nothing. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath, suspended on the edge of revelation. "Your Honor," she began. Her voice was firm but trembled at its edges, carrying the emotion of years spent ignored, dismissed, and deceived. "I stand here today to reclaim what was owed to me, not only as a wife, but as a woman, as a mother, as a human being." She paused, letting the words sink into the heavy air. Her eyes flicked toward Kody, stiff, rigid, unyielding. "I want what's mine," she repeated, this time with a deliberate, unwavering tone. "And I am not backing down." A wave of murmurs ran through the courtroom. Spectators leaned forward, the tension snapping like a live wire. 4 years the world had watched Meri Brown on Sister Wives. Loyal, patient, heartbroken, quiet. Fans had seen her endure humiliation, loneliness, betrayal, and the heartbreak of a disintegrating family. They had seen her struggle to hold the family together while the man she loved and trusted slowly moved away, emotionally and spiritually. But today was not about heartbreak. Today was about justice. Today was about Kody Pass. A 12-acre stretch of Arizona land that had once represented a dream. A promise of 4 homes for legacies, 1 family living in harmony. Kody's fantasy. But that fantasy had been built on lies, manipulated numbers and hidden deeds. For years, Meri had invested time, effort and money into this dream. She had trusted, she had followed, she had waited. And now, she was done waiting. Behind Meri, Janelle sat quietly at first, arms crossed, face tight. The years had etched themselves into her features, yet in her eyes blazed a fire that mirrored Meri's. A shared history of betrayal, a shared understanding of what it meant to be pushed aside. They were no longer just former sister wives. They were allies, bound by injustice, preparing to face the man who had tried to erase them. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a calm demeanor, gave a nod. "Mrs. Brown, you may proceed." Meri nodded, unfolding the first sheet of paper. "This," she said, holding it up for the court to see, "is a payment statement from August 14, 2018. It shows a deposit from my business account into the family trust, intended to fund the purchase of Kody Pass. Yet my name was never included on the deed." She lifted another sheet. "This is an email from our real estate broker, confirming my investment interest in the property." Her voice grew tighter as she continued, "And this is a duplicate of the show contract signed by all the wives. It states explicitly that income from filming was to support our shared family future. The development of this land, the building of homes. All of it. Shared equally." Her lawyer, sitting to one side, nodded subtly, his eyes gleaming with quiet approval. "When Kody and I legally divorced in 2014 so he could adopt Robyn's children," Meri said, her gaze slicing across the courtroom to him, "I did so believing the promise of spiritual equality would remain. I believed the covenants we made would be honored. That was a lie." Kody's jaw clenched. Robyn's eyes darted downward, her hands twisting in her lap. "I spent 30 years in this family. I raised a child. I contributed to building a show that made this place possible. And now I have been informed, quietly, indirectly but deliberately, that I am not worthy of a single acre." Meri gripped the edge of the stand, knuckles white. "I surrendered my legal marriage. I surrendered my voice. But I am done giving." Behind her, Janelle nodded faintly. Silent, resolute. A shared understanding passed between them. This was no longer about loyalty or patience. This was about reclaiming what was theirs. Meri inhaled slowly, turning back to the judge. "This isn't about real estate," she said. "It's about dignity. About promises kept. About preventing one man from rewriting history for his own gain." The courtroom was hushed. Every eye focused, every breath caught. The judge inquired carefully, "Mrs. Brown, are you claiming that the Kody Pass property was always intended to be split 4 ways among the 4 wives?" "Yes, Your Honor. That was the agreement. Verbal, emotional, financial, and documented." "And did you know your name was not on the deed?" "Not until late 2023 when Janelle and I compared documents," Meri replied, her voice unwavering. "And what did you do?" the judge asked. "I confronted Kody," Meri said slowly. "He claimed he worked harder so he deserved more. But that was never the arrangement. We built this as a family. Equal. Together." The judge nodded, pen scratching quietly across her notes. The bailiff approached the clerk with an evidence folder. Kody's lawyer rose, objecting coldly, "Your Honor, this is emotional rhetoric. Mrs. Brown's contributions were spiritual, not financial. She has no claim." Meri's lips twitched, a faint, disbelieving scoff. Her lawyer stood, eyes sharp as knives. This was the first blow. And the storm had only begun. Janelle speaks, the Flagstaff dream crumbles. The courtroom held its breath as Meri stepped back, her point made, but the battle was far from over. A hush lingered like a storm cloud, thick and heavy. Then the quiet scrape of a chair echoed across the polished floor. Heads turned. All eyes fell on Janelle Brown. She rose slowly, deliberately, holding a small, worn ledger to her chest, her own history in her hands. For decades, Janelle had been the quiet architect of the family's finances, managing budgets, tracking investments, balancing accounts, all while maintaining a delicate equilibrium between 4 wives, a demanding husband, and the watchful eyes of reality television. But the woman now standing in front of the judge was not quiet. She was fire in human form. The judge gestured toward the witness stand. "Mrs. Brown, please proceed." Janelle took a slow breath and began, her voice low, calm, but with a force that demanded attention. "For more than a decade," she said, "I oversaw every penny that entered this family's accounts. TV earnings, book deals, public appearances. Everything. I tracked the funds allocated for the Coyote Pass property. And yet, when I finally requested the deed, when we asked for transparency, our names were nowhere to be found." She held up the ledger. "This ledger contains documented contributions from every wife. From Meri. From me. From Christine. Even minor contributions from the older children, who trusted the promise that this land was meant to be ours. A legacy for our family." A ripple passed through the courtroom. Kody's jaw tightened. He shifted in his seat but didn't speak. Robyn's hands twisted nervously in her lap. The tension was palpable. Janelle's voice hardened, each word a strike. "But the deeds say otherwise. Only 2 names appear repeatedly, Kody Brown and Robyn Brown." A gasp from the gallery. Cameras would have captured it all. The shock, the disbelief, the simmering outrage. Janelle's green eyes locked on Kody. "I confronted him," she said, her tone sharp as broken glass. "He said he gave more money. He said he worked harder. That it made sense for him to claim it all. The same thing he told Meri." She laughed, a bitter, scornful sound. "Of course he did. Patterns like this don't appear by accident. For years he spun promises into obligations. He told us what we needed to hear. In private, on camera, at family gatherings. It's all shared. We're building this together. Trust me." And we did. The judge leaned forward, pen hovering above the notes, silently urging Janelle to continue. "For years," Janelle said, voice trembling with restrained fury, "Meri stayed. Even after the 2015 catfishing scandal. Even after Kody distanced himself publicly. She stayed because she believed loyalty would be rewarded. She believed that if she waited, if she remained faithful, the promises would be honored." Her hands clenched the ledger tighter. "But waiting doesn't build houses. Waiting doesn't secure your name on property. Waiting doesn't protect your rights." The courtroom felt smaller, heavier, charged with a tension that made the air crackle. Every person present understood. This was no longer a quiet family dispute. This was a reckoning. Janelle took a slow, deep breath and allowed herself a brief flashback. The Flagstaff property. 4 homes, 1 dream, a shared future etched in dirt, pine needles, and sunlight. She remembered standing with Meri and the rest of the family, listening as Kody outlined his vision. "We'll each have a section," he said, voice grand, full of assurance. 4 homes, close but not too close. This will be our legacy." Robyn had beamed, full of trust. Christine had looked skeptical, questioning logistics. Meri, heart tethered to fragile hope, had held on to every word like oxygen, desperate for belonging. Their spiritual marriage had already been legally dissolved to accommodate Kody's adoption of Robyn's children. But he had promised Meri, "You'll always be my wife in every way that matters." The words now echoed in her mind like a broken lullaby. She had believed him. She had clung to him. She had imagined coffee on the porch, grandchildren running through the yard, a future built together. And now it was all dust and lies. Janelle returned to the present. "In 2023, while investigating a late property tax notice, I discovered the truth. The legally owned plots were not ours. Meri's name wasn't listed. Mine wasn't listed. Only Kody and Robyn." "Kody," Meri lowered the microphone, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the magnitude of what she had finally said aloud. Years of silence, years of compliance, years of watching her contributions vanish into shadows, had culminated in this single, unflinching declaration. For a moment the courtroom seemed suspended in time. Reporters paused mid-note. Kody sat rigid, his usual composure fractured. Robyn's face had gone pale, her carefully crafted mask of serenity crumbling. But Meri felt none of their tension inside her chest. She felt something far heavier, far more precious. Release. She thought of the countless nights spent crying quietly, praying that the promises she had been given would be honored. She remembered the sleepless hours, the whispered words of hope to herself when the family cameras weren't rolling, when no one would witness her struggle. All of it had led here, not to vindication alone, but to justice, acknowledgement, and the reclamation of her own story. Her gaze fell on Janelle sitting beside her. The unspoken solidarity between them was stronger than any courtroom rule. They had been underestimated, written off, told to wait, told to be patient, told that their worth was measured only by obedience. Today that lie had been shattered. Meri's lips curved slightly into a soft, almost imperceptible smile. It wasn't a triumphant grin. It wasn't joy in the way the world often expects. It was the quiet satisfaction of a woman who had endured, who had survived, and who had finally risen from the long shadow cast over her life. She straightened her back, breathed deeply, and for the first time in decades she let herself feel whole. Every whispered word of betrayal, every empty promise, every unfairly weighted glance of favoritism and dismissal, all of it now belonged in the past. She had taken her power back, not with anger but with truth. As the gavel banged and the court prepared for recess, Meri didn't speak to the reporters, didn't shout from the steps, didn't bask in the spectacle. She walked slowly, deliberately, her head held high, feeling the sun on her face through the courtroom windows, imagining the wind sweeping across Coyote Pass, across the land she had fought for, across the life she was determined to reclaim. The world outside might still whisper, still speculate, still judge. But inside, Meri knew something profound. She had reclaimed herself. The years of invisibility, the silent sacrifices, the endless waiting, they had not broken her. They had prepared her. They had sharpened her resolve, strengthened her courage, and forged her voice into something that could not be ignored. And as she stepped out into the light, shoulder to shoulder with Janelle, Meri Brown felt the first true taste of freedom. Not the freedom of victory alone, but the freedom of knowing that no one, no lie, no manipulation could ever erase her story again. She had spoken, she had fought, and she had been heard. For the first time in 30 years, Meri didn't just exist. She belonged.